but he was a terrific planner. And maybe the biggest point I'm going to make to you today is trait number whatever, is that the success of the 21st century is going to depend on being broadly educated and keenly aware. 360 degrees around you. I've already read you Einstein's piece. But narrow training works against you and against them. More and more, I am convinced that a broad-based liberal arts education wrapped around a specialty is the way we're going to prepare succeeders of the 21st century. And the way we're going to succeed during the 21st century. So let me tell you something. When I got to Fairleigh Dickinson in 1964, I was required, no matter what my major, and I was undeclared, but accounting majors, chemistry majors, didn't matter, we were required to take 9 credits of English/literature in our first year. We took a glorious course called Literary Masterpieces, which was 6 credits, 3 and 3, plus one other course, and then we had to do it again in our sophomore year. Guess what? After 18 credits, mandatory, everybody at Fairleigh Dickinson was de facto an English minor. That was Peter Sammartino. Broadly educated, keenly aware, because the primary activity that in which most adults are going to engage in the 21st century is learning. These people are also going to have to be very comfortable with ambiguity, uncertainty, and change, because you're going to see an awful lot of it, so you have to get used to it. Albert Einstein used to say, the most beautiful experience you have is to gaze at a mystery. So why are we all scared of that? In his incredible book, Thomas Cahill, a great American historian, who is in the process of finishing 7 books called Hinges of History, and picked 7 times in history in which, if civilization had made one choice or another, things would have been completely different. His second book was called The Gift of the Jews, and he talks about Abraham. Abraham, the father of the 3 great Western religions. Half the world adheres to an Abrahamic faith. And when he talked about Abraham in those times, you know, people thought life was kind of circular. You're born, and you live, and you die, and so does the next generation, and this is what happened. But according to his interpretation of the shortest sentence in the Old Testament, 2 words, when God said to Abraham, "Go thou," Lech lecha in Hebrew, "Go thou," it turned the human perception of life from being circular to being linear. And then one generation is responsible for the next and responsible to the one before it. And then Cahill said, it's the only original thought that mankind has ever had. That's what happens coming out of ambiguity. I have a favorite book, which I give to my Sands of Time students, called What Does It Mean to Be Human? I've held this up in front of you before. My favorite passage from this book, well, this book was put together by Frederick Frank, who, because of his affiliation with Albert Schweitzer, made lasting, lifelong friendships with people like the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Oscar Arias, Václav Havel, Elie Wiesel, and a few other people that you might have heard about. And he asked them many years ago, given Schweitzer's philosophy of a reverence for life, would you kindly offer your suggestions? What does it mean to be human? This is a compendium of some of the most uplifting thought you will ever encounter. But I want to tell you what Annelie Katt said. She's a professor of sociology, health, and education at the University of Bremen in Germany. And she said, life is not a program. It seems to be an invitation, a challenge to take the next step into the darkness, uncertainty, and creativity. I've kept on promising myself to write her an email, and I'm going to get to that one of these days. Ambiguity is a marvelous thing if you're not afraid of it. But you can't be, because you can't deal with the 21st century if you don't understand that things are ambiguous, things are different, things are puzzling, but you have to make something out of it. Next, accountable to yourself and then to others. It doesn't work the other way around. Accountability is critical, but you've got to be accountable to yourself. You know, I run the world's smallest company because I have me in my practice. I'm in. But I make myself very accountable to myself. I have a business plan. It's a 2-pager without a complete sentence in the whole business plan, but I know what to do. And every Monday morning I look at it. Where am I? What am I doing? How have I done? Where am I falling short? Etc., etc. I am accountable to myself. Familiar with Frida Kahlo?
Yeah.
Great artist. Here's what she said. They thought I was a surrealist, but I wasn't. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. If you're accountable to yourself, things work. But only if you understand that one step taken in advance is greater than 10 steps taken to catch up. That's a kind of a spiritual thing that we have to teach and that we have to abide by ourselves. The successful person, the succeeder of the 21st century is going to be a team leader, but understanding the concept of shared leadership. Leadership is a cooperative, collaborative experience, and Michelle talked about that before. That's a hallmark of Generation Y. They are very, very collaborative. They are going to be incredible leaders once they get serious. But that's another thing. The succeeder of the 21st century is going to be the owner of a clear, efficient perception of reality and a strong, comfortable relationship with it. The big challenge is what's real. It's not easy to be objective. That's really what this one is all about. But there is no choice. This person is also going to be autonomous and independent. This is another driver of right-brainers in the 21st century. The need and to have the freedom to effectuate your own ideas. And in workplaces in which that's not possible, nobody's happy and nobody's productive. The succeeder of the 21st century is going to be wildly optimistic. And boy, oh boy, this is one of my favorites. And look what shows up in Time magazine 2 issues ago. And if you haven't seen it, go get it. The Science of Optimism. Well, there is a neuroscience to optimism. And it strengthens my point. See, the person who is optimistic, you know, to use the old saying, doesn't see the glass half empty, it's half full. But the truth is that it's optimists that solve problems, that see opportunities, that invent things, and that move humanity forward. A pessimist has never done any of those. So now comes this article. And as it appears, we humans are hardwired to be optimistic. And you know what? Don't ask me to explain this, but this has to do with the amygdala and the frontal lobe and the hippocampus and the caudate. Anybody know what that stuff is? It's in there. Now, so I'm reading this. We have something called the optimism bias. We want to be optimistic because neurophysiologically we are wired that way. We're wired to see the world being better than it really is. We're more optimistic than realistic, but collectively we grow pessimistic. So that's an external influence, pessimism. Long story short, to me, what that means is that, oh, let me give you one number that came out of this. This is cool. 70% of Americans in a survey found, thought that families were less successful than the previous generation. But 76% of respondents thought their family would be better in the next generation. That's not reality. We are hardwired to be optimistic. So if we, and as a result, you know, what optimism relies on is mental time travel. Seeing the future and then, of course, seeing it in better ways. Reimagining the future. That is a human trait. There's a correlation between people who express high levels of optimism and physical health and mental health, and there's no reason for it. Interesting conclusion that our brains aren't just stamped by the past, they are constantly being shaped by the future. So now, please folks, read this article, and then you say to yourself, if we are hardwired to be optimistic, why are we working counter to our own self-interest by being pessimistic? Does not compute. So the succeeder, again, in the 21st century is going to be wildly optimistic. It's also going to be somebody who has a non-hostile sense of humor. Your life is fun, what you do in your profession is fun, your family is fun, the world is fun. Once again, I talk about Albert Einstein. You know, he was a notoriously careless dresser. He didn't care what the hell he was wearing. And so he was once criticized for wearing stripes and plaids. There are pictures of him in which he's got more different patterns on than you can imagine. And he was once called on that. And Einstein said, you know, when you consider the universe as being something, expanding into nothing to become something, wearing stripes and plaids is easy. That is such a deliciously, delightfully non-hostile sense of humor. When he was still living in Europe, and his wife, who was not his wife for too long, said to him, the representatives of government want to come to see you, go put on a suit. He said, if they'd like to see my suit, open the closet door. If you can't laugh at what's going on in a non-hostile way, and that's Abraham Maslow's expression, a non-hostile sense of humor, chances are none of the rest of this works. And then, this person is going to be inductive, a powerful inductive thinker. Right-brainers will understand the 21st century, left-brainers might not. This is being called the right brain century. Creative, uninhibited nature of the century. The problem we have is that we've all been educated in left brain ways. Unless, of course, you went to a Montessori school, but that came to an end when you were in 8th grade. And all of that gets reinforced because we run our schools in left brain ways. We run our hospitals in left brain ways, our communities in left brain ways, our corporations in left brain ways, our governments are being run in left brain ways. Therefore, we still think we can motivate people in left brain ways. And where we're getting away from left brain necessity in thinking, because automation takes so much of that and does it for us. That's the process-oriented type of thought development. It's freeing so many people to be much more right brain. Well, if we can't motivate that in right brain ways, basically with an aura of autonomy, purpose, and mastery, becoming good at something, having a reason to do it, and being autonomous, the whole thing falls apart. That is the inductive thinker. So the challenge here is to motivate in that way as well. But the inductive thinker is going to be the one who can figure things out. Many people alive today are going to see well past the midpoint of this century, including some of us, or yous. And some are going to see the beginning of the next. They will be successful defined not by what they do for a living, but how they think about their lives. And how are we going to do that? Well, really quickly, by reading. There is no more proactive activity to use in the learning process than reading. Even the best programming on television, PBS, the History Channel, anything you consider to be good learning opportunities, still puts you in front of the television. And the minute you do, and if you had an EEG going on, you'd see your brain waves going like this, and when the television is turned off, it looks like one of those things that they get alarmed about in hospitals. The minute you become a passive receiver or a target, you have stopped proactively learning. The most, and perhaps only, well, no, but the most proactive and energetic learning experience is reading. I know what we're talking about adapting to Gen Y, but the next thing is unplugging. These things surround us. There's a reason this is called a crackberry. Learning a second or even third language, not just to communicate with somebody in a negotiation of a piece of business, but to think a different way. Reaching past your comfort zone. There's plenty of time in your comfort zone after you die. Until then, that's no place for you. And by challenging ourselves with mental exercises, puzzles, conundrums, things that challenge our brain to do what it does, not related to our work or even family. A number of years ago, we had a dean in the business school, David Steele, who was a pretty big-time world thinker. He used to say in speeches to students and prospective students, and this is a quote because I asked David for his speech and he gave it to me. Let me tell you, he said, about this century. My simple message to you is that we must become citizens of the world in order to excel in this ultra-competitive marketplace. I believe that more than ever, advanced education is essential. More importantly, we must go through a major rethinking of the concept of knowledge. A change in emphasis from hard to soft knowledge, emphasizing what will differentiate us as individuals and as a nation. And what he was talking about: communication skills, knowledge of self, multicultural perspective, core values, ethics, team building, innovativeness, and creativity. In essence, he said, the focus is on developing outstanding interpersonal skills. Okay, so I just gave you 21 traits. But to make life simple, it occurred to me afterwards that is there a pattern here? And there is, because they fall into 4 classifications of traits. And those classifications are dimension, resolve, vectors, and creative dissatisfaction. Dimension, multi-talented and broadly educated. Were 2 of the traits. Resolve, determined, persistent, stubborn, committed, purpose-driven, decisive, planned and prepared, accountable to self, and autonomous and independent. Those are people who are highly resolute. Vectors, this was my interesting little discovery here. And there were 4 vectors: outward, inward, upward, and forward. Which traits are those? Altruistic, empathetic, democratic in character structure, team leader, wildly optimistic, problem-centered outside oneself, and the owner of a clear and efficient perception of reality. Each one of those is either outward, inward, upward, and forward. And then the 4th is a person with a creative dissatisfaction for the present. Curious, creative, willing to think, and comfortable with ambiguity, uncertainty, and change. And that brings us actually to the 21st trait again, and that is inductive thinking, the ability to say, first of all, not to be afraid to say, but to say, what's going on here? Sherlock Holmes was a tremendous inductive thinker. All these dots, when I connect them, what do I have? Learn how to answer that, and everything else falls into place. And then, from a personal commitment point of view, on our part, number 1 is to embrace a suggestion made by Alfred Adler, who was a disciple of Sigmund Freud and then broke away from him, and then ultimately influenced the man who I think was the most influential in changing the way we understand about what we understand about human nature. That's Abraham Maslow. But Alfred Adler said, the educator must believe in the potential power of his pupil, and he must employ all his art in seeking to bring his pupil to experience this power. All his art. There's nothing technical about that. That has to do with the traits that we're talking about. I want to end with 2 thoughts. I have more thoughts, but lunch looks awfully good. Many years ago, I ran across a thought by a man by the name of Robert Ardrey. If anybody here can tell me you recognize him, I will be duly impressed. I never heard of him before I ran across this thought. And not that I came across anything he wrote. I came across a beautiful book in which he was quoted. Robert Ardrey was Chicago born. He was a philosopher, an anthropologist, a playwright, born in 2008, died in 1980. And this comes from one of his writings. As a matter of fact, I must show you that I carry it around with me. The reason I'm reading it from here is because these glasses aren't strong enough anymore to read this. I carry this around with me, and I read it rather frequently. Robert Ardrey said, "We were born of risen apes, not fallen angels. And the apes were armed killers besides. And so what shall we wonder at? Our murders and massacres and missiles and our irreconcilable regiments, or our treaties, whatever they may be worth? Our symphonies, however seldom they may be played. Our peaceful acres, however frequently they may be converted to battlefields. Our dreams, however rarely they may be accomplished. The miracle of man is not how far he has sunk, but how magnificently he has risen. We are known among the stars by our poems, not our corpses." So I ask all of my students at the end of my class to consider that the world is either an endless flow of possibilities or a limited choice between probabilities, and to make that decision. I think I'm done. Any questions? Comments, questions, discussion?
Professor Amdur, I have to thank you for this wonderfully inspirational talk. It really does open up a world of possibilities.
You're more than welcome, and I'm thrilled that you asked me to do it. And I got to tell you something. See, I'm not done. I wasn't done. One of the things I've come to realize is that our jobs, when it comes to ourselves, we have to motivate ourselves. When it comes to others, we can't. Motivation is an internal thing. It's intrinsic. What we have to do is inspire. There's a world of difference. You know, I read something recently by a CEO. He sounds like a bit of a hard guy, but I kind of like what he said. He said, "If you need me to motivate you, I probably don't want to hire you." But it made me think about the dramatic difference between motivation and inspiration. We have to motivate ourselves, but we have to inspire others. Did I forget to tell you about anybody? Read this book. Read this book. This is the blueprint of the 21st century. A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future by Daniel Pink. You know what? If I tell you what he said in the very first page of the book, this is what you need to know. The last few decades have belonged to a certain kind of person with a certain kind of mind. Computer programmers who could crank code, lawyers who could craft contracts, MBAs who could crunch numbers. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. The future belongs to a very different kind of person with a very different kind of mind. Creators and empathizers, pattern recognizers, and meaning makers. You read the rest of the book. Kathy, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Professor. Does anybody have any questions for Professor Amdur?
The other book was, by the way,
Pardon?
the other book, What It Takes to Be Human?
What does it mean to be human?
Okay.
We have that in the library, Dirk.
Okay. I have to remember the title to find it.
This to show you that I'm not quite as organized as I thought it was. I got to talk to you about one thing real quickly. Who knows John W. Gardner? Who knows who he was? I think he made a major contribution to American society. John W. Gardner was Lyndon Johnson's secretary of HEW before it became HHS. He wrote a series of absolutely fabulous books, and this one is called Self-Renewal, the Individual and the Innovative Society. Life isn't the train ride where you choose your destination, pay your fare, and settle back for a nap. It's a cycle ride over uncertain terrain with you in a driver's seat, constantly correcting your balance and determining the direction of progress. It's difficult, sometimes profoundly painful, but it's better than napping through life. Okay. Now, if you read my articles on Sunday morning, that's going to be in there a week from this Sunday. Career-oriented, nonetheless. Anyway, This is what I mean by inspiration. I look for my inspiration this way.
I just had a question. You were talking in the beginning, Professor, about Facebook, LinkedIn, all this stuff. I always feel, I mean, when I see people go in the supermarket, they're talking on the cell phone, texting and everything, I always feel that there's some need that has given rise to all this. I mean, do you see that?
I'm not a sociologist. I can't talk about need, but I can tell you that what it does, any innovation presents a choice of using it wisely and using it frivolously. I mean, the internet, the single greatest advance that humankind has ever made. So 80% of internet traffic today is spam. 80%, and that's rising. Right? And what do we use it for? Idiotic emails that you get when you wake up in the morning because they try to slide those in at 4:38 a.m. We use it for pornography, for God's sakes. And the distribution of. And we use it to teach people how to make bombs. Everything we've ever made, pharmaceuticals, addictive drugs, airplanes, bombers. We have a choice of how to use these things. I don't know if it's addressing a need, and I don't really see a need to walk, for 3 kids to be walking from one building to the other in the middle of the day, going like this, instead of talking to each other.
There you go.
I walk into the student cafeteria, and there's 6 honors students or global scholars sitting at a table, and there are 6 frickin' Blackberries on the table. I don't see that as a need. I just think that we need more control over our thoughts to say, how am I best using my time as a human being? Okay? And how am I developing myself, and how am I helping you to develop? So I just think the choices aren't being made.
I just wonder, because it seems to me, I always felt that there's like this need to reach out to other people. I mean, it's almost a desperation. Why do you need to be on a phone 24 hours or communicate?
Well, it's a problem. It's a problem. A Microsoft executive a few years ago coined a term called continuous partial attention. I mean, we call it wired. That's why I said one of the things you need to do is unplug. Unplug. Is it a need? I'm not sure, but it certainly is a phenomenon. Okay, I have a question. You want to eat?
There's one more item on our program before.
Oh, that's right, Kathy. I'm sorry to almost intercept that. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, now, thank you, Professor, so much. Jesse, I'll just ask you to undo whatever you did before with the air conditioning. Please turn it back on. Okay, now we have the final event on our program, and then I do promise, I know lunch is here. But I do want to thank all of you, all right, for all you do, for all you've done this year. As we said earlier, we have had a great year. The opening of the San Martino room, the library fete, which raised $2,000, thanks to the support of the faculty and staff of the Metropolitan campus. We have here as an honored guest today the chair of our Metropolitan Campus Faculty Library Committee, Dr. Paulette Lausch. We had a great year because we did successfully recover from all of our renovations, although it looks like we're starting something else as we speak. But, as Professor Amdur advised, I am remaining optimistic. I think because of all the great things that we've done singly and together for our students, I think the university is doing everything it can to help us to bring the library back to what it can and should be. In the tradition of Dr. Ruth Schwartz, who really was the first librarian ever hired by Fairleigh Dickinson University, the first person holding the MLS. I would like to continue in her tradition of civility and courtesy and welcome. And I'm looking at all of you and I'm thinking, thank you, Paul, and this is not in order of importance, it's from left to right, because I think just genetically I'm a right brain thinker. I'm left-handed, that's why I'm in my right mind. Thank you, Paul, for all that you do in reference, for the little things and the big things that you've done to make the department better in the short time that you've been here with us. Dirk, thank you for the wonderful job that you are doing with your team of Paul and Mike in, working in our government documents area. Mary Ann, thank you for all of the things that you do, big and
You're
small,
welcome.
in our periodicals department, working with students, keeping our plants beautiful, making lovely displays, and so much more. Angela, among your many talents, you are our library videographer. Okay, and congratulations on your master's degree.
Yeah.
Ray, guiding spirit of the San Martino room, of the Magister room, of the other room, of so many of the art exhibits and everything else that takes place in our library. Mitch, thank you for keeping all of those databases definitely in line and organized and available. Debbie, thank you for what you do to keep all of our wonderful library materials. And in fact, we have many of the books that Professor Amdur referred to, but we're going to have to get John W. Gardner. I don't think we have him yet. And we're keeping them in motion, moving out to our students, faculty, and staff. Ablash, thank you for what you do to help keep the library safe and secure. Judy, thank you for all the work you do to keep our books coming in, and the ones that are here, keep them in order, make them available, and those that are leaving, to help them get out the door. Michelle, thank you for joining us today as a representative of the Hackensack side of the campus. Bob, thank you for all you do to keep us safe and secure. You know, your vigilance, your commitment, and your kindness to our international students is really extraordinary. Justin, thank you for all that you've done. You've given up, I know, many evenings of your time over the past year to help to fill in circulation when we have been shorthanded. Kenny, thank you for being responsive to student needs, for being reliable, consistent, and always ready to help somebody out. You have a lot of empathy. Paulette, thank you for being our chair of our faculty library committee. You've done a great deal for us over the past, well, many years, but more specifically these past 2 years. You've helped the library really break new ground in so many areas. Fred, thank you for all that you do for our students in overseeing the current discussions group, in really being the linchpin of our evening periodical staff. You have been here since 1994?
17 years, 18 years.
And many more. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Kathy.
Leslie, you've been with us, and I see Jason sitting there. You've been with us since you were a student, as has been Michael. Leslie, thank you for all that you do to keep us safe and secure, and to oversee evening and weekend operations and periodicals. Jason, you've done so much, but most significantly during the past year, in addition, I know, to being Mary Ann's trusted companion there in maintaining the Ruth Schwartz Reading Room and in facilitating all the events that take place there, you actually single-handedly took on that bewildering array of information, literacy, and other library data, and you actually made it clear, comprehensible, and easy to understand. You whipped it all into shape. Josephine, thank you for all that you've done to make our books available, and thank you for what you're doing right now in the San Martino room, creating, and giving a physical representation to that new collection. I'm watching those labels go on the books that say San Martino room. Very proud of that. Michael, last but not least, but you're back on the left. Thank you for all that you do in reference, for your interests in information literacy instruction, for your new interest in copyright, but most especially for all that you do in reaching out to our learners individually and in library instruction. Now, I hope I didn't miss anybody. I missed dear Jessie. Jessie, thank you for your expertise with that complicated programmable thermostat, which I was not going to go near. But on a more serious note, thank you for all that you've done. You've helped me with endless university paperwork, forms, bureaucracies. And importantly, you've been, I know, a real part of the team at Circulation that has accomplished a great deal. And also you've taken on these new duties, a Facebook page, a photographer, you know, maybe soon to be Angela and Jesse together, YouTube, okay? And all of the things that you do. So really, thank you, Jesse. To those who are not here today, you know, it really was a collective effort. I want to say thank you to all of you. I have now a few certificates of appreciation. Again, not in order of preference, you know, I thank all of you. But Jason, thank you. For all that you do, but especially all those statistics. Jesse? Oh, thank you. I never knew the library used so much stuff. Justin, thank you. Ray? And all projects that you've worked on. Those who are absent today. I did have something for Provost Joseph Kiernan, but he has not been with us today, so we'll have to drop him off at his office. But I have to say, the Office of the Provost, they've been wonderfully supportive, responsive. I don't think we would have gotten the lighting upgrade without them. We probably would not have been first to get an elevator without the support of the Office of the Provost. I'd like to also thank Facilities. They're not here to join us today. And Advancement. Without Advancement's help, we really would not have been able to raise the money we did. And Dr. Paulette Laubsch for her work. And to Professor Ellie Amdur for our other speakers, Michelle had a lunch appointment, and I think Dave Miles had a busy day, so they will have to get their certificates also via intercampus mail. Thank you all, and as we say en français, bon appétit, or in Spanish, que aproveche.
Okay, we thank Kathy for her leadership.